Shalom. My name is Yair Davidiy. I'm speaking to you from Jerusalem, the capital of Israel. And I'm speaking to you on behalf of Brit-Am, Hebrew Nations, an organization that finds the lost 10 tribes amongst Western nations. We have a lot of proofs. We have proofs from all different fields of study, from the Bible, from rabbinical studies, rabbinical sources, the Talmud, Midrashim, and so on, and also from archaeology, from linguistics, from mythology, from every field of study that is pertinent to the subject. We have proof. We have proof that the lost 10 tribes are now amongst Western nations. That's what we do. We research the subject. We also bring the subject to the recognition, to the knowledge of the general public. And we work towards the reconciliation between Judah, that is the Jewish people, and the 10 tribes of Israel. And at present we are concerned with biblical proofs. Biblical proofs that prove that the lost 10 tribes are amongst Western nations. That is where the lost 10 tribes are to be found, regardless of any other questions, what percentage of them are, who exactly they are. That the general gist of the Bible is to tell us where they will be located. And the Bible tells us that in the end times the lost 10 tribes will return primarily from an area to the north and west of the land of Israel. Israel is in the Middle East, on the edge of the Middle East, at the eastern edge of the Mediterranean Sea. To the north and western Europe, to the north and west of Israel is Europe. Europe is to the northwest of Israel. The Bible also tells us that the lost 10 tribes will be at the edges of the geographical entities. They will be at the ends of the geographical extremities. They will be at the ends of the earth. And they will be in the isles of the sea. And taking all of these, the different indications together, we arrive at the West European coast, we arrive at the British Isles, and we arrive at the area of Northern Europe. That is to the north and to the west of the land of Israel. We have, in Isaiah 49, lo, these shall come from afar away, these from the north and from the west, and these from the land of Sinim. Another talk, we showed that the land of Sinim refers to Australia and New Zealand. And before then he said these will come from the north and from the west. From the north and from the west, meaning from the north and from the west of the land of Israel, meaning northwest Europe, as additional evidence shows and supports. And at all events, this verse is telling us that they will be to the north and to the west of the land of Israel. And it is speaking about Israelites. According to the context, the verse is speaking about Israelites. So we have two groups of Israelites. Historically, there were two groups of Israelites. There were 12 tribes. These 12 tribes split into two different sections. The northern section comprised 10 tribes. They were taken away by the Assyrians and lost consciousness of their ancestry. The second section of the Israelites consists of the Jewish people of Judah, referred to as the kingdom of Judah or as Judah in the Bible. And the prophecy speaks of these two separate entities as having different destinies, even though at the end times they will reunify, as we are told in Ezekiel 37. The question arises, which section of the Israelite nations, 10 tribes or Judah, is this prophecy referring to? The context of this chapter, of the verses, would tell us that the lost 10 tribes, the 10 tribes of Israel, as distinct from Judah, are being referred to. Isaiah 49 speaks of the Israelites in the end times returning. He speaks of them returning, and speaks of them in Isaiah 49:12 returning from the north and from the west, that is from the northwest of the land of Israel. And this is what is being spoken of, and the context shows us that he's referring to the 10 tribes of Israel. He's referring to the 10 tribes that are distinct from Judah. 49. In Isaiah 49, the eyes are called upon to listen to God. Israel is a servant of God. Israel will raise up the tribes of Jacob and restore the preserved of Israel to be an enlightening influence on the Gentiles and to the geographical extremities of the earth. See 49:6. It speaks here of a covenant of Israel, and it speaks here of the restoration of the tribes of Israel, and it speaks here also of them being located at the ends of the earth. It also says that they will settle and civilize the wasted heritages and free the prisoners, while converging together along their paths of migration. 49:9. Now this is a section of 49:9. It says 49:9, saying to the prisoners, come out, to those who are in darkness, show yourselves. They shall feed along the highways, and they shall feed along the ways, and all the bare heights shall be their pasture. and it continues in one continuity through verse 10, 11, 12, where it says that they should come from far away, from the north and from the west and from the land of Sinim. And the rabbis in the Talmud and the Midrash, in Numbers Rabbah 1:6, Rabbah 2:9, the Talmud Yerushalmi, chapter 17, and so on, they apply these verses to the 10 tribes of Israel. They say these verses are applying to the 10 tribes of Israel in their times of exile, and that they will return as predicted in Ezekiel 37. They mention 3 areas: the Daphne, Sambation, the place of darkness, and we have shown in a separate study that historically is referring to specific areas to which the 10 tribes were exiled, and from there they moved, they gathered themselves, they coalesced, they rebelled against their oppressors, and they moved from these areas to Western Europe. And we've shown this, and these areas are historically known in classical literature of the Romans and the Greeks, and also of the ancient Jews. At all events, the Talmud is confirming that these verses, this section is referring to the 10 tribes of Israel, and this section tells us that the 10 tribes of Israel, when they return, they will return from the north and west of the land of Israel, and also from the ends of the earth. And that is where the lost 10 tribes have to be searched for, and that is the beginning. Thank you. May the Lord God of Israel bless all of you.